The battle is on and the nation is choosing sides. Ever since word came out that Apple just said no to that court order requiring them to help the government pierce the encryption in one of the San Bernardino killer's phones. Currently, the entry of 10 wrong passwords erases all the data on an iPhone. The FBI wants that feature disabled so they can use what is called brute force, trying millions of computer-generated passwords till they guess right. Apple says the software doesn't exist, and while they're not saying they couldn't make it, in a public letter released yesterday, CEO Tim Cook says this: "It's something we consider too dangerous to create. Once created, the technique could be used over and over again on any number of devices. It would be the equivalent of a master key capable of opening hundreds of millions of locks, from restaurants and banks to stores and homes. No reasonable person would find that acceptable." Joining me for more on the two sides of the issue are Cade Crockford. Cade is director of the Technology for Liberty program at the ACLU of Massachusetts. Cade, good to see you. Brian Kelly is a former assistant U.S. attorney, now a partner at Nixon Peabody. Good to see you, Brian, as well. Brian, I'm told you said it's Apple versus America. What does that mean?
Well, it seems to me his statement is a little overblown. It's a little bit of grandstanding by Apple, perhaps a marketing ploy. It's a narrowly tailored order to one phone of a deceased terrorist who I have trouble figuring out why a deceased terrorist has any privacy rights, particularly since it wasn't even his phone.
But he's not arguing. I don't think he's arguing the privacy rights of the shooter. I think he's arguing the privacy rights of the three of us and millions others for on whom he believes bad actors, whether it's countries or criminals, which you dealt with for a long time, could pierce my privacy. I'm not worried about the killer.
Well, fair enough. But here you have a court order which was issued upon a finding of probable cause, as you do in almost every search warrant case. People view the sanctity of their home with high regard for their own privacy. But the police can go into your home with the search warrant. Why can't they go into the cell phone? And here, Apple is resisting a lawful court order, and it appears to me that they're grandstanding only for marketing purposes.
Kate, isn't that a perfect parallel? A lot of courts have said the phone is our home in 2016. All this private data. You can get a search warrant. A guy like Brian could get a search warrant in his former life and go in our home and check out everything. Why should we be allowed to do that and not allowed to pierce the veil on a phone?
So Apple complied with many search warrants in this case, disclosed all of the information that they possessed about this person's account, including his iCloud dumps that had been stored with Apple. Apple simply doesn't possess any more information that it can give the government in this case. What the government is asking Apple to do is unprecedented. The government is asking Apple essentially to serve as a spy in the service of the government by writing new code that will help the government break into this phone. Apple has no obligation under the law to do that.
Well, court considers otherwise, obviously. The court
sure,
says it does
a
have
higher
no
court may
obligation.
disagree.
But can you get back to Brian's question and then continue for a second? What is the difference between a search warrant, which I don't think you'd argue again, maybe in individual cases you would, a search warrant being issued to search every crevice in my house, and one to say search every crevice of my cell phone?
Again, Apple does not possess any more information. So Apple cannot give information it does not possess to the government. So the analogy is simply false. And I would also remind people that President Obama a few months ago spoke out when China was demanding that technology companies install backdoors, which is essentially what Apple has been asked to do by the FBI. President Obama said that's completely anti-democratic and puts the security of millions of people at risk.
Well, isn't he acting like a hypocrite?
That's
says that to China,
what
and then his Department of Justice
is trying to do
how do you
right
respond
now.
to that? I mean,
well, the Department of Justice got a lawful court order. They followed the rules. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable search and seizures, and you need a warrant to search things. That's what they've done. Now, a federal judge has found probable cause and determined that it's not unreasonable to search this particular phone. There's not this parade of horribles that's going to open up all our phones to China.
Well,
it's this phone that they want to look at. And to me, it seems unreasonable for Apple to send out a letter to all its customers, get everyone wound up when they know darn well it relates only to this one phone. And the government does seem to have a compelling interest in finding out if there are any other ISIS-related killers out there who want to do us all harm.
Can we get a third voice into this conversation who's echoing some of the things you're saying, Brian? This is the governor on our radio show, Boston Public Radio today. Listen to what Charlie Baker had to say.
I guess the thing I don't understand here, and maybe it's because I'm not tech savvy enough, is whether or not it's possible for Apple to do something here that could meet the meet the requirements of the Justice Department and the court order, while at the same time not creating something that could be used by others to sort of open up the whole world of privacy associated with anybody's phone.
You know, Kate, he says he's not very tech savvy. I'm even less tech savvy. That seems to be the Solomonic choice, which is what you're talking about. Create software that is specific to this killer's phone that can't be used by somebody. Is that technically doable?
So the idea that the government is simply trying to unlock this one phone is patently false. That's certainly what they've argued in court, but it's demonstrably untrue.
That's what the court order says.
For months and years, in fact, the FBI has been going to Congress and begging Congress to give them authorization through a statute to force companies like Apple.
Wait,
Hold on,
but
let me
let's
finish.
just- yeah, sure.
To build backdoors into their systems. Congress has resisted, mostly because technology experts, people who know a lot more about this stuff than anyone sitting here, or with due respect to the governor, have said it's impossible to build a backdoor into a system that can only be exploited by the government
Yeah, but
against
I want
bad
to get
people.
to that. So
But
that's
wait,
the
let me
important
just
part.
finish. I have
If I
one
may,
more.
who cares what the FBI's agenda is? If it turns out Apple can do what the governor and Brian Kelly want them to do, you say they can't, that would be the perfect
I
solution,
didn't say they
right?
couldn't. I said that they are asking Apple to do something that is unprecedented, which is essentially the equivalent of getting a court order to force a locksmith to break into a house for them. Apple does not possess any information that they have not disclosed to the government. I want to back up and return to Congress. Congress refused to give the FBI this power. So what the FBI has done now is try to use an 18th century law, the All Writs Act, to get a court essentially to blow open this door that Congress has refused to blow open. And this is how precedent works. It's not just going to be this one case. If this ruling stands in higher courts, and it may actually go to the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court sides with the FBI in this case, it will mean that all internet-connected devices, medical implants, cars which run on computers, will be vulnerable to these kinds of government hacks.
Would you
No,
agree?
see, this is the parade of horribles, which is not present here. This is a specific court order about a specific phone. And the irony of the ACLU position, because it's so unreasonable, they're going to precipitate a clash with the FBI that leads to congressional action that probably broadens it far more than
I
this
want to get
order.
back to Congress for a minute. Let's assume Tim Cook says, well, let's forget Tim Cook. If it turns out that she's right and that Tim Cook is right and then you are wrong, that they can't devise software that is specific to this phone, would you not change your position?
Well, first of all, they absolutely can.
Well, let's assume they can.
Well,
he says they can't.
You know more about Apple's technology than Tim Cook?
If they can't, well, then the whole thing is moot.
No, it's not moot. It may be technology that's applicable, like Kate says, to a broad. And Tim Cook says.
Okay, if that's the case, then do it in a controlled environment with the FBI here. Run it just on this phone, and then destroy it when it's done.
How about that? Stay there for a second.
Simple.
Why can't something like that happen? There is a firewall. Apple agrees to do it, but Apple does it.
Well, that
FBI
sets the
doesn't
same
have
precedent.
the technology. Why does it set the precedent if it stays in the hands of
It
Apple?
sets the same
It's not
precedent
the
because then
government
it
taking
means
over.
that the government has a right through the courts to force technology companies to serve their clients malware on their
Oh, you
devices.
mean they could get another court
exactly.
order, another case?
It just
You know, I wanna-
blows open this completely untenable future for technology.
I want to get back to Congress just for a second here, Brian. You know, the context for this, I think, matters a lot. This encryption technology all is post-Edward Snowden. It's post the Director of National Intelligence lying to Congress and Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon when he's asked whether they're, quote, collecting any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans. Clapper said, no, sir, we all know that was a lie. That's the context in which the American people are asked to make a judgment here. Do we trust the government to just use it in this individual case? Why should we trust the government?
Well, I think we trust the government every day in terms of the federal judges who preside over a whole host of very significant and important cases with all sorts of delicate issues. They rule every day. And in this particular case and in this particular instance, you have a federal judge who made this ruling. So we can't just throw up our hands and say, boy, we can't trust the government to do anything. The whole society will shut down.
On that note, Cade, nice to see you.
Thanks
Be
for
well.
having me.
Brian, it's great to see you as well.
Take care.
Thank you so much.